you everyone for being here.
Thank you so much, Cody. Thank you. I'm so excited to be having this conversation today and super, super excited for this event. Thanks for everybody who's shown up. I would love to get a sense of who's in the room. I'm sure Aaiún would too. So why don't folks just take a minute to introduce themselves in the chat, say your name and say where you're connecting from. It'll be really nice. And yes, I also just want to start by telling everybody about Aaiún's wonderful bio, which I'm going to read from the back of her book, which I love. Aaiún Nin is a writer, a mixed media artist and painter born in Luanda, Angola. Aaiún's poetry has been published in multiple Scandinavian magazines and journals. They are also the contributing editor of the Dutch magazine Marronage. They have performed in literary festivals in Oslo and in Denmark. They've studied in Zimbabwe and South Africa. They currently reside in Poland. And I am super excited to get into this conversation. And thank you so much, Aaiún. So wonderful. How you doing? How you feeling? Today's launch day. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was really nervous earlier today, but I'm feeling good about it now. Excited to, get this conversation going and just, feeling good about things now. And that this is finally happening, and that it's a real thing.
It is a real thing, I mean, yeah, you have your book in your hands, or like a virtual version of the book in your hands.
I'm still reading from pieces of paper because the post has been very delayed. Can you imagine?
I can imagine. It's the kind of crazy world we live in now where, the global supply chain is like in a mess and we're all trying to figure things out.
Yeah. So I am, I'm rudimentary. I'm back on 1-2.
Which can also be a fun place to be. Well, I know everybody is probably like, just can't wait to hear from you. So can I ask you to read the title poem, Broken Halves of a Milky Sky? I just love that title so much.
Yes. We are the broken halves of a milky sun, who do not dream the same dreams. We inhale the same air as crows, soft as raw cotton, stiffened in a stitch. To breathe is to convulse. The dystopic future is this moment, a plague of locusts on prized crops. The ever constant, sprayed over with insecticides that grow harsher by the day and poisons the grass and poisons the well and poisons the bodies of the we that are covered in mud, we that know gunshot, we that left school, we that fled home, we that crossed the deep blue Atlantic, the we that are Nigeria, Benin, Ghana, we that live and survive, we that die, we that are dying like the forests of the Congo. Missing limbs, malnutrition, cobalt mines. Dystopia is 1471. Dystopia is Prince Henry. Dystopia is laying 6 feet under with bullet wounds. The present is drowning in salt water. The present is asylum camps. The present is war. The present is separation. The present is being auctioned in the Sahara. The present is imprisoned for fleeing war. The present is fleeing war. The ever constant is a holy book. Dystopia is colonialism. Dystopia is narco-terrorism. Dystopia is opium fields. Dystopia is addiction. Dystopia is the present. The present is a failing economy. The present is genocide of indigenous people, a Holocaust left in the shadows. The present is terror. The present is human and insect feeding on the same digested hymen. The present is rage. The present is protest. The present is necrotic. The past is homophobic. So is the present. And we inhale the same air as crows.
Wow. I mean, I feel like this is such a hard-hitting poem, and a poem that really seems to like capture this moment we're in. And at the same time, the language is so beautiful. So I wonder if I can ask you to speak a little bit to this poem. How did it come to you?
Like most of the, I would say like a third of the poems, they were written actually during the first lockdown in Copenhagen during the winter time. And at the time I was going through a lot of border regime politics and just general fuckery. And I wanted to write about the events that are happening at the moment as recurring and not isolated as a thing that happens exclusively in the past or that are only happening now, and that what has happened before is directly linked to what's going on right now. And as far as the language goes, I think it's more, I mean, the reason why I chose it is because in Angola, there is this culture of oral history, and a way of making people remember a lot of stories or culture is through repetition. So it's about employing that kind of tool as a way also of feeling connected to a culture that I feel like at this point I can't really partake in its entirety.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking to that. And, you know, you mentioned, I know you were born in Angola, right? And, you know, employing that tradition of oral history. I'm wondering how the different places, and when I was reading your bio, I spoke to like some of the different places where you've been located. How has that experience of migrating through many countries influenced your work?
I think it's one of the things that I would say that informed me into being who I am today, because I've lived in so many different places and as such have experienced so many different ways of being othered. And I think it's predominantly from that space of being and existing as the other that I decided to, or it was the prism onto which I decided to write from. And other in different ways, whether it's racially, nationality, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, but there's always the othering as a constant thing in my life.
And then the other thing I wanted to speak to, and actually, can I ask if Cody or someone who has the book, can someone show the book cover? Because it is stunning. I just absolutely love it. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I love that. Quite a few people have got hard copies that they can show up. But it is stunning. And it's only at the last minute that I realized that you created the cover art. And you're also a mixed media artist. Can you speak a little bit to, like, you know, how did the cover art come to you? Like, did you know that this is the cover art? Like, what's that process like? And how incredible it is as an artist and a writer to be able to create the cover art for your own book. I'm kind of jealous of that skill. In fact, I'm very jealous of that skill. Can you speak a little bit to that as well?
Sure. Actually, it was pretty wild because this painting in particular was a painting that I was also working on, or that I worked on during lockdown. And I would alternate between writing and painting. And then it took months and months, and I was living in a shared apartment in a tiny room, and the painting is really large, and I was just barricaded inside this room and working on this obsessively. And then so then when I spoke first with Astra and everybody else involved, we then started talking about what the cover art would be. And then I had mentioned that I was also a visual artist, and then people suggested to take pictures of it and then try to incorporate that. And I actually thought it was really cool because, like you said, it is rare for people to have these two like elements in their practice be merged. So I do feel very fortunate.
It's just like an incredible skill to have. And that also makes me wonder, when a piece of art comes to you, like, how can you tell this is meant to be a painting, or this is meant to be a poem, or this is meant to be a piece of text? Can you tell from the very beginning?
Sometimes. I think the source of what I'm trying to communicate comes from the same place, and then it's just different mediums. With this painting, like much of the content of the book, it's, you know, at least how I was feeling when I was working on it, was about, you know, a very melancholic, a very sad time, a very angry time, and also somehow endless. Because I was in a position where I couldn't imagine that things would actually get better. So the process itself of painting was, in a way, just something to make myself calm down from a lot of the anxieties that I was having at the time. So I think that it's the same source, and then it just depends on what my brain capacity is at and what I can take out.
And I'm like curious because you spoke about like writing these poems and actually painting this, what ended up as part of the cover art during the first lockdown.
Yeah.
Did you find that the lockdown influenced your creativity in any way? And if so, you know, how did that affect your creativity?
For sure, because I mean, in the good old days, there was always something to do. There was people to see, there were bars to visit, people to sleep with. And then lockdown happened and there was nothing else to do. And there's only so much Netflix that anybody can watch. And then I just was in this room and it forced me to engage with things creatively. So that's what I did.
And talking about a lack of people to sleep with during lockdown, can I ask you to read one of your most sensual poems, please?
Sure. Let me just see if it's all here. Yes. We consume the body during sex, spit out contracted breath, strings of profanities, trails of saliva on skin, sweat, the salty taste of sex, the acrid weight of depression, temporarily lifted, bent over in a small cubicle, made-up face pressed against wall, index ringer finger deep inside, mating animals, primordial beasts, entranced by the pulse of a body on all fours, engorged member, ramming, rimming, weakened knees, gush of fluid, drip, white, transparent, drip, release, shout, bodies collapsed, cotton mouth, dried lips, wet cunt, immobile, an imagined trail of smoke, lingering scent of fucking, consume the body during sex, slow, soft, quickening pulse, slow, soft tongue, split wave, split apart, legs apart, dissect the body with tongue, with finger, with a smooth hard, with lips, pin the body, lick the markings on the skin, spit words, split worlds, contracted muscles pour fluid, cunt fluid floods the body, silken crevices, white, transparent, tongue tied behind swollen lips, pinkish flesh, come against death's slight breeze, white foam atop waves, nature's force, fracturing the fabric of human constitution, carnal, only carnal, without mystery, with necessity. Staccato release of bodies, arched, bent over, erect, pressed against a wall, milky liquid running down, languidity of orgasm, soft bruises, deeper breath.
Thank you so much. I almost feel like that was a scene from a film. Maybe I have an overactive imagination, but like I have these strong visuals going through my head right now. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to the politics of actually writing about desire and writing about sex.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that firstly, it's that as Black AFABs, as Black femmes, as Black women, we're not the ones that get to talk about sex. It's like we are the ones like that sex happens onto. So there is very little agency, there is very little conversation about our desire for sex and our enjoyment of sex. And so I think that us writing about it and reclaiming that space is a very important thing to do, because we're fracturing the narrative of what the Black quote unquote female body is. Because everybody else gets to enjoy sex in some capacity, but we're not often spoken of like this. And I think that sex is a pretty cool thing to do, and a lot of us enjoy it, and I like writing about it.
Yes to that. Like, I am so with you, so with you. And just to like let everybody know, we are going to open this app and make it interactive. So if you do have a question, note your question down. So the minute I am like, do you have any questions? You can pop them in the chat. If you want to pop them in the chat, yeah, you can do so. Or maybe Cody can say if we will give people permission to actually speak, but just to let you know that you will have the space and time to ask questions. So please make a note of the questions that you have for Aaiún. I wanted to also ask you about, I feel like your book just travels through space and time, but also travels through a range of emotions. And I could feel all the emotions so strongly. There were some poems I was reading, I was like, phew, Aaiún was pissed, you know? And then the next poem will be like so sexy and hot, you know? So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to how you channel your emotions in in your process of creativity. Yeah, like the connection between how you're feeling and what you produce creatively.
Yeah, so the first thing was that I wanted to create something that once again challenged the narrative of Black womanhood, and that we're just angry, you know, that we're just victims, we're just people that bad shit happens onto all the time. And sure, things do happen, but that's not all we are. And I wanted to very purposefully write about all the different things that we, just like everybody else, go through, that we also experience tenderness, and we're also sad, and we're also very happy, and we're salty as fuck, and we're shady. But in some way, despite all of this, we can also be happy. And I think that for me, it was important to do this because it wasn't something that I was seeing very much. And so I just did it because I wished that it was out there for me and many different times in my life. So it was a very conscious decision. It wasn't so much that I would feel an emotion and then write from that prism. It was more that I just wanted to see those things there for us and by us. Because I think it's different when we read the normative literature, which is, you know, mostly white, or yeah, just white and straight and male. And sometimes it can be really good, but we're always rendering our experiences through that, and it gets exhausting and eventually invisibilizing. So I think that in creating this, it was about, you know, just putting ourselves there, because this is also our world.
No, thank you so much for doing that. I think that's like deeply political work and so important to put out all the many facets of Black womanhood out there, for all of the reasons that you said. It doesn't exist. And I think, you know, it's really important, especially for future and present generations. Yeah. So it's incredible. Thank you. And like in terms of like the diversity of poems, right? And in the book, how then do you decide what's the title poem? And I think when you make that decision, it almost feels political, right? Because I think whenever you're reading the collection, you're looking out for the title poem. How do you figure that out?
I think there was like the Danish version of the book translates as On the Blackness of My Skin. And then for this version, there was a lot of discussion, but then I also wanted to create something that I felt was quite abstract, just because I like it. So we spent a lot of time trying to think about what that could be. And then when I moved to Denmark, it was actually like I grew up predominantly in Southern Africa. So when I decided to go to the land of the white man, I went straight to Denmark. And it was intense, you know. And I noticed there that for some reason the light there was, or like the sunlight, was really pale in comparison to how it can look in Southern Africa. And I remember speaking to someone about it and saying like that the light feels very milky. And in Angola, and people often refer to themselves like back in the day that like we are, you know, the people of the sun, like we are descendants of the sun, and there's a lot of mythology around that. So so to be broken, and I guess it kind of ties into like the different places that I've lived in, but in this sort of like not obvious and very fragmented or like abstract way.
And so did you find that the way in which you like produced and the stories you told changed like significantly when you moved from South Africa to Denmark, for example?
I mean, I would say that like, say with something like racism, it'll always be that. It doesn't matter where you go. And there's a kind of universality to racism. But I think, of course, that how it can happen and how it's operationalized is different and contextual, much like perceptions of gender and racialization. A person who is Middle Eastern in Europe is considered a Middle Eastern person, but in the African continent, they are just Muzungu. So there is that. And so I think it's also important to not create this, and I really tried to do that, to not create this unilateral narrative about what these like different systems of oppression can be, because things are contextual. And like, for example, here in Europe, like there's a lot of racism, but it's not, or like it differs in some ways to how the racism that you're experiencing in South Africa or the racism that you're experiencing in the United States is, but it's still the same thing. It's still the same system or the same institution that allows for these injustices to happen. So I think it was just about being in a context and speaking from that vantage point without creating a uniformity. And I can speak about the things that I've gone through, and I do that, but I can also speak about the similar things that we as a collective go through, but I don't want to be the voice of anything per se, because I am just my own person.
Yeah, no, I think that's super important, like not like putting yourself in that position where it's like I speak on behalf of all of these people, but at the same time.
Nelson Mandela is already dead.
Yes. So folks, I'm sure some of you like have questions for Aaiún. If you have a question and you want to type it in the chat, I invite you to do so now. If you want to speak to your question, maybe just put your name in the chat so I know to call on you. And I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. And I'll ask Aaiún some more questions and then just come back to everybody else. So because I'm a writer, I'm always interested in like chatting about like writing process and rituals and all of that kind of stuff. And I suspect in an audience like this, there are other writers who are interested in this kind of stuff as well. So
they're here.
So I hope these are not like completely self-serving questions. Yes. But do you have any particular writing rituals, or because you're a multimedia artist, do you have any particular rituals that you follow just, you know, to inspire your own creativity? And if so, what are those?
You know, I feel like for me to put myself in a creative space, it requires a little bit of sadism. So I have to be a little bit hungry, a little bit cold, a little bit uncomfortable, just you know, just to be in a space that will force the creativity out of me. Um, so when I was writing this, for example, in Denmark, like my room was very small and the paintings that I was doing were quite large. And so often I would write in the middle of the night with the windows open in the winter and, you know, feel like I have to inhale the smell of paint. So in a way, it's uncomfortable, but not in a bad way for me, because I feel like sometimes, you know, constant, like being too comfortable, I don't know, you kind of have this like livestock existence. You're kind of just always grazing and you can never be like pushed out of yourself to experience something. I don't know whether it's transcendent or, you know, hard hitting or, you know, sharp somehow. So I always feel like to be able to write the things that I want to write in the way that I want to write them, I always have to experience this like multifaceted way of isolation. So I would say that that is a ritual that I always put myself through.
I have to say, that's not the kind of response I was expecting at all.
No, I wouldn't say like, no, my day starts with a coffee, a little walk, and then I sit down at 10 and then I write. No, that's not what happens.
I love it though. I feel like you sound like what in my imagination a true artist is like, and the rest of us are just playing pretend. Oh my goodness. Do you ever like suffer from any sort of block when it comes to your creativity? And if so, what do you do, if anything, to kind of like, you know, get your creative juices going?
So I shift from one medium to the other. So if I'm feeling blocked with writing, I'll paint. And if that's happening, then I'll start working on performance pieces. So then I'm always looping between one and the other. So I'll say that I haven't actually experienced like an actual block within the three different mediums that I predominantly work in. But at certain times, it's been incredibly difficult to write. Also, considering the very how should we call it? Very tight situations that I've been in for the past 2.5 years or so. Yeah, immigration.
Yeah, that's a heavy one. And that was like one of the themes that came across really, really strongly in your book. And I feel like, yeah, it's an issue, you know, that the world needs to pay more attention to.
And you know what the thing is here is that I often feel as if people have this willful blindness to what's going on around, you know? Because how is it that like thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are, you know, suffering under border regimes, being deported, being brutalized? This is happening, like it's on the news. If people don't see it, it's because they don't want to see it. And they claim this weird innocence. And I'm like, okay, whiteness. It's perverse, the insistence on innocence whilst being the perpetrator of so much violence. And like the fact that, like in the poem that I just read, like the amount of genocide committed by whiteness, by white people, and still they are the ones who are perceived as peaceful, and not us Black women, Manje, imagine, you know? It's just something that is there, and I feel like there is a kind of restraint almost to speak on that in a very overt way, you know, to talk about, you know, not just white masculinity or paternalism, but also like the role that white women play in upholding white supremacy, you know, because now I feel like in like feminist discourses, we're all just talking about like this magical sisterhood that we all have. And it's like, no, you push us under the bus. You know, you shouldn't even have access to the internet, please.
So I shouldn't be laughing, but when you said that, yeah, there's some people I definitely want to block from the internet and like from all the, you know, social media platforms, which themselves are a whole different problem. But I think that's part of what's really powerful about your work, that you don't shy away from these issues and you name them and you just state things as they are and there's no holding back. And I think it's powerful, it's bold, it's needed. You know, it's definitely speaking truth to power. So thank you for doing that so boldly and so bravely. Yeah, thank you. And I was just wondering, like especially with dealing with these hard-hitting issues in your own personal life and in your work, do you feel like there's any sort of backlash you experience as a result? And, you know, how do you keep going? How do you sustain yourself? How do you manage to keep speaking, you know, truth to power?
I think that I've had really incredible people, and I see some of them here, hello, to have really shown me like an incredible amount of love and support. And I, you know, like, honest to God, feel like if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. But at the same time, I don't know, neurodivergence is a wild thing. Like I think I'm too stubborn. I can't not speak about the things that I notice, you know? And I also feel like I do it out of spite, you know? Because, you know, and yeah, sure, there has been a lot of backlash. Like, there are certain things that I am very worried about, but I think it's about integrity, and I don't want to exist against my own grain, even if it takes me to very messed up situations. I think I just, in a way, it's almost, I feel like it's my heritage, you know, like my family in Angola were, you know, a lot of people were activists and revolutionaries. So I think that that's just something that runs in my blood, except I'm just being super extra about it.
And actually, how does your family respond to your work?
They don't.
I know that can be quite complicated. Yeah. We have some great questions in the chat, so let me come to some of those. And for anybody else who has a question, please pop it in the chat. If you want to speak, just put your name down and we shall see if we can get you on mic and muted. So Yanse Yanse says your book really touches upon many things, but is there something else, either in terms of format or theme, that you would like to explore in the future, which is also linked to that Alessandra was asking, would you consider writing fiction, like short stories or a novel? So I don't know if you want to answer both of those together.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's not so much that I would like to write fiction, but I'm very interested in writing surrealism and creating this sort of like post-apocalyptic dreamscape where people grow inside fruits and and you know people change gender and change their shapes and can become undead and living and just constantly existing in a space of ultra contradiction, but also abject. You know, I like things that creep you out and you know, make you deeply uncomfortable. So I think I would go using, you know, my own experiences as a reference to create this kind of landscape. So I think this is as far as fiction as I would go, because I actually think that reality is often more interesting, especially if you if you're a black faggot from Angola.
I am so with that. I'm so on you with that, because I say to people, like, some of the things that happen in our real lives, they are more crazy than anyone would imagine, right? But I love like the ideas for the post-apocalyptic book. I'm sure Astra House would definitely want to hear more. Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. And also, oh, you're getting lots of compliments in the chat. You look amazing. I love your necklace. I didn't think I said that earlier. Yes.
Thank you.
Loving it. Can you also speak a little bit to maybe your sources of inspiration? And maybe if you could also include in that, if you have any favorite poets or any favorite like multimedia artists who inspire you.
Yeah. I guess this is testimony to the colonial education that we all receive in the African continent. But like, I actually started writing poetry because when I was 17, we were doing T.S. Eliot and E.E. Cummings as a part of our set work for English. And like Ash Wednesday and the whole part around like preludes and hollow men. So it was a kind of like surrealism that I found really cool at that time, because the poetry that we were reading was very romantic, and I didn't really care much for that. And then afterwards, I started reading more poetry from like interacting more with my parents in Angola. That was, very revolutionary, by people like Alda Lara, who is an Angolan writer, Bebetela. So I think the access to the rage, for example, was something that I learned or like adopted from Angolan poetry and Angolan music, because if there's a medium that represents the Angolan people, it's like a lyrical musicality. And then later on, I think Naira Wahid, Varshan Shire, my mind is completely blanked out, but the more contemporary queer writers, but also the both realism but the kind of like realistic but superstitious landscape of Chinua Achebe, I also really liked. So that's the whole thing about that humans and spirits can like live with each other, and that we are constantly interacting with those things to create something that is surrealist but African, because actually our culture is very magical in that way. So I don't feel like I often have to fish for Western narratives when we have the juju ourselves.
Yep, that is so true.
So we don't have to go far. So I think that I find like a lot of inspiration like closer to whatever home is.
Yes. Sorry, the chat is cracking me up. So Jada wants to know, which actor do you want to play you when you're rich and famous and your life is made into a movie?
Kate Blanchett.
Seriously?
I don't know. I've never thought about it. I mean, who? Oh, Lupita Nyong'o. Pull up Kenya. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We approve. And Alessandra also wanted to know earlier how the different countries in which you have lived affected your approach to art.
You know, it's in a way it's quite sad because like in a lot of the places that I lived in Southern Africa, there was a lot of like art has become very taboo in a way. You know, like there's a lot of like political unrest in all of the places that I've lived. And far and wide, the first people that get like persecuted and kind of like dismissed as degenerates are always the artists, you know. So, you know, with African parents, where you have to be an engineer, or you have to be a doctor,
or a lawyer.
You have to be a lawyer, and then you decide to be an artist. You're the disgrace. You're the family clown. So, you know, there was that, and then, so like I said, like most of my life, I've been informed by the things that, you know, I was consuming that were from Africans, artistically. And then coming to Europe, there was always this, it kind of stuck now because I was very shady about it, in sort of calling people out, but people would often assume that the views that I have came from living in Europe. And that wasn't the case at all, but it was just this arrogance that people have, that if you have a particular way of thinking, if you, I mean, shit, people here will even claim your intelligence, you know? So that I would say is an experience that I had, and I've always felt like I had to defend my own Africanness, not in terms of just my Blackness, but the way that I think is the case because I'm from Africa, because I grew up in Southern Africa and made the worst mistake of my life by coming to Denmark.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So just to let folks know, if you do have a question that you want to ask, you've just got about another 5 minutes to ask the question. You don't want to miss out on this incredible opportunity to ask Aaiún before she gets famous and you have to call her PA to even try and ask her a question. So if you do have a question, please pop that into the chat.
Yes, people fuck with me whilst I'm still poor.
But Aaiún, I wanted to ask you, what do you want this book to do in the world?
I think that I wanted to show like the black queers, the black little girls, that we don't have to feel so alone and so small, and that we can feel the feelings and it's okay, and that the isolation that we have, even though we can be in contexts where we're surrounded by people who look like us, that there is something out there, and that if you just look a little bit, you'll find your people. I think like with this book and the even just in the Danish version, the amount of Black women that approached me and sort of said thank you, or just commented on the fact that I had written or put language on things that they didn't know that they could put language to. I felt like, you know, that was pretty great, because this is also about we're often so discouraged from speaking, from talking. Like so many things become taboo, you know. So many types of violences are taboo, you know, in a lot of our cultures, and that's also one of the reasons that they proliferate. And I think that by bringing it to the forefront, I will definitely get into a lot of trouble, but I will do it because I have younger sisters and I have a niece, and I wish that somebody had done this for people our age, people, because everybody else was too preoccupied with just trying to survive. And I'm also out here trying to survive, but whatever strength I have left, I will do this.
And thank you. Thank you for doing this. It means a lot. And we have a couple more questions in the chat. So thank you, folks, for these questions. And folks want to know, what are your thoughts on the reception of the book now that it's been published in English, and how is it different from the launch in Danish? Or what is the difference between the two titles, Danish and English titles, if there is a difference?
Yeah, so the Danish title is sort of a more direct link. It's more like it insinuates that a lot of what's written in the book are musings that are stemming from the blackness of my skin. And then the English version, the title is more abstract, but I feel like because it's in the language that I wrote in, it somehow, I feel like it contains the emotions and more, if that makes sense. And as far as the reception goes, I don't know yet. So the publishing date is today, right? So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in a couple of days and weeks.
Well, we really want to make sure it gets a great reception. So everybody who's here, please, after this conversation, don't just keep this amazing launch to yourself. Share the word, spread the word. We need to support our own. So please tell all your friends about this book and ask everybody to buy it from their favorite independent bookstore. So there's another question from Aaiún. And Aaiún wants to know what you're working on at the moment. I know I get the feeling you're always doing multiple things, at any point in time.
Yeah. So what am I working at the moment? I'm working on a couple of paintings, and also I was recently in Iceland and I just got like this really intense rush of writing, and it was really cool. Like I felt almost high with like the surge of creativity that I had. I felt like there was something in the air in Iceland that made me write so much. So yeah, at the moment it's just this very like obscure, not linear, kind of like impressionist story about my childhood and the decomposition of reality.
Oh, wow. The decomposition of reality. That's going to stay with me for sure. Well, thank you so much, Aaiún, for this conversation. It's been really incredible. Huge congratulations to you for putting this incredible book of poetry out in the world. And I am going to hand back to Cody to tell people how they can get the book and where they can get it and all of the good stuff. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much.
Over to you, Cody.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Nana Darkoa. That was such a wonderful event. And Aaiún, really, I feel so lucky to have been able to hear you read this morning, afternoon, night.
Oh my gosh, we should have a closing poem. I'm sorry, Cody.
Yeah.
Let's have a closing poem. I'm sorry.
Okay, should I? Okay.
Yeah.
Your room is cold and dark, anxiously neat. It smells faintly of soap and deodorant. It smells of clean laundry, dry soil, and pot plants that need to be watered. And quickly we are naked. Sometimes lust is not so bad. It was a curious thing to see you undressed. Granted, we were strangers to each other, made familiar by the dizzying conversation we had in a bar. We had both surrendered to the truth that our respective pains would never put together the pieces of our yesterdays. So there is this. You asked me what I wanted. I said I wanted to have sex with you. You're someone I wrote to. We met in a graveyard, talked briefly, and had sex the entire afternoon. We fell asleep like that in stretched sheets, limbs rolled about, my head resting on your thigh. It was nothing else. We just wanted to fuck each other. We met in a cafe. Our existence is transient, split between continents, belonging only to time and briefly to desire. It's a funny thing, intimacy, that we can spend hours, days together and still feel so far into each other, as if the fleeting nature of our encounter lacks the needed substance to transform sex into something more. The pardoned obscenities of our fingers sign a mutual agreement that we will never be parts of each other. There was only lust, and sometimes lust is not so bad.
Oh my gosh, last is not so bad indeed. Thank you so much. I am glad I said a closing poem because this is like the perfect note to end. And thank you so much. And finally, this time I'm properly handing back to you, Cody.
Well, I'm going to be super brief because I definitely want to leave on that energy. Thank you so much, Aaiún and Nana Darkoa. This is, again, just so great. If you check in at bookculture.com or one of the links, you can see information on how to buy Broken Halves of a Milky Sun and also pre-order Nana's book, The Sex Lives of African Women. So again, thank you, everyone, and to Jeremy and Aaiún. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. Have a great day, great evening, wherever you are in the world.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Congratulations.
Thanks so much.
Are you still there, Aaiún? No, she's gone.
They left.
This was amazing. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Cody. Bye.
Bye, Jeremy. Thank you for everything.